Yo, what's going on everybody? It's FreakyDude99 and welcome back to another Destiny 2 build video. This time I have my Grand Slam Titan coming back in full force. Now this Solar Titan build absolutely mops the floor with any piece of content you throw in it. Whether it's Legend Onslaught, Legend 0 Hour, Grandmaster Nightfalls, you can go in, detonate some serious damage, and walk away unscathed as you stay in the middle of combat surrounded by enemies, dealing solar damage, sending out waves of scorching and solar cyclones. It is insane what you can do with this build. Now, of course, as with all my build videos, there's a picture at the end of the video along with a dim link in the description for easy copying. Now, without further ado, let's jump into the build. Now, starting off with the subclass, we have the Super Burning Maul, which actually gets transformed into a massive one-hit super due to our exotic Pyrogale gauntlets. Now, this causes it to send out a massive 3-wave flame that detonate into solar cyclones that deal even more damage. This is an absolute rocker of a super with these gauntlets, and it means we deal so much damage that we can just melt through bosses, champions, and anything we need to get through. Moving over to our class ability, we have Rally Barricade, which is just perfect for PvE content. While standing behind it, we get increased weapon reload speed, stability, and fall-off damage range. This just means it's fantastic to take into any piece of content, especially into pieces of content where you're sitting back and you're trying to play a little bit more safe, especially when you have allies that are sitting back and just plinking away. Now, moving forward, we're also taking Throwing Hammer. This is fantastic because this means while we have Rally Barricade to kind of stay back, we can go in with Throwing Hammer. Anytime we strike a target and pick up our hammer, we get Cure, which is just a burst of healing, and it means we can just stay in the fight, rack up our Roaring Flames, and just stay in combat no matter what. Moving forward, we also have our grenade, Healing Grenade. Now, this grants a burst of cure to us, and it also grants us restoration for a couple of seconds. Now, this is really important for this build as we don't have any other way of granting ourselves restoration, which means before we actually go into the middle of combat, we want to throw a healing grenade on ourselves, pick up restoration, and then keep it going with our solar ability weapon takedowns. Then for our first aspect, we're grabbing Roaring Flames. Final blows with solar abilities or ignitions increase the damage of our solar abilities. This applies to our Throwing Hammer and to our super. So whenever we're going in to deal damage with our super, make sure your Roaring Flames are stacked up before you send that massive 3-wave off. And then for our second aspect, we also have Consecration. So while sliding, we activate our charged melee to send a wave of solar energy forward, damaging and scorching targets as we leap up into the air, and then while airborne, we activate our solar ability again to slam down, sending a large wave of damaging solar energy that also ignites any enemy that is currently scorched. This means we cause massive waves of damage that just melt anything we come into contact to. And then also because of our Pyrogale gauntlets, there is a second solar wave that gets sent out and detonates into a solar cyclone that just does even more damage. It really means Consecration does it all. Now, moving down to our fragments, we're grabbing Ember of Ashes, which we apply more Scorch stacks, which is generally 50% more to all of our targets. This means we can proc a lot of Scorch stacks and ignite enemies super easily. We're also grabbing Ember of Empyrean, so our solar weapon or ability final blows extend the duration of restoration or radiant effects applied to. Keeping restoration and radiant going on this build is vital, as if you don't have restoration and you're in the middle of a group of enemies, you are not making it out alive. Now moving forward, we also have Ember of Char. Your solar ignition spreads scorch to affected targets. This means that whenever we're detonating ignitions with our Consecration, it's just spreading more scorch and dealing more damage for us. And then finally, Ember of Searing. Defeating scorched targets grants us melee energy and creates a fire sprite. Fire sprites are fantastic as they grant us a little burst of grenade energy for our healing grenade, and then also we are scorching pretty much everything, so we get Consecration back that much quicker. Now, that's going to do it for the subclass. Let's move on to the weapons. Moving on to the weapons, we have our main exotic of choice, which is the auto rifle Monte Carlo. Monte Carlo comes with the intrinsic trait Monte Carlo method, which causes damage dealt with this weapon to reduce the melee cooldown and grant a chance to fully charge our melee ability with each takedown. Add to this, it also has Markov Chain, which grants increased damage for each melee takedown or takedown with this weapon. This also grants us ammo for this weapon immediately into the magazine whenever we get a melee takedown, and it also means we just have a ×5 stacking damage buff that shreds through red bars and even into orange and yellow bars. Monte Carlo is a really fantastic weapon, and after you send off a consecration, you just pull this out, fire it off a couple of times, and before you know it, you'll have your melee to use in another consecration wave. Now moving on from that, our solar weapon of choice in our energy slot will usually be something that can get a lot of takedowns quickly or just enhances whatever we're using. Of course, explosive personality is a fantastic waveframe to use. It clears out enemies in Legend Onslaught like they're nothing, and then you also have things like the Ikelo shotgun, which can roll 1-2 punch and is just a fantastic solar shotgun to take in. It can clear out enemies quickly, get precision hits rapidly, and with 1-2 punch it means with ×3 roaring flames you can take down enemies very quickly while conserving on ammo. Finally, for our heavy weapon, of course you have Apex Predator, which is just a legendary solar rocket launcher that nukes enemies, but if you're looking for something else, of course there's something like Crime Mutiny, which can roll Vorpal Weapon and Incandescent to just clear out enemies like crazy, as well as burst down champions and any types of bosses that you need. Now that's going to do it for the weapons. Moving on to the artifact. Starting off with the artifact perks, we're grabbing 3 anti-champion mods in the first column. Most notably, we're grabbing Overload Auto Rifle for overload rounds on our Monte Carlo. This also overcharges the auto rifle, granting it a 25% damage buff in legend or higher content. This just means it becomes a lot more viable into whatever content we want to jump into. Moving to second column, we have Kindling Trigger. Radiant causes solar weapons to apply Scorch to unscorched combatants. This means we can walk into rooms, apply Scorch to everything, and then consecrate to cause massive ignitions. Moving down, we also have From Whence You Came, which increases ability damage to taken and scorned combatants. Just really nice cherry to have on top. For third column, we're grabbing Flint Striker. Rapid Solar Weapon precision hits and Rapid Solar Weapon final blows grant Radiant. So of course you want to go in with whatever solar weapons you have, make sure to get a couple takedowns to get Radiant going, and then you can just keep it going with your consecrations and throwing hammers. We also have Torch, so while we're Radiant, we deal increased weapon damage to combatants affected by Strained and Stasis debuffs. Enemies are always debuffed by these because allies are always rocking the subclass, so it's important that we grab this because, hey, it's always in effect when we're with teammates. And then of course we have Heart of the Flame. Casting our solar super grants nearby allies Radiant and increases the damage of our super for each nearby ally. This plus Pyro Gale plus ×3 Roaring Flames on our one-hit super means we absolutely nuke bosses to pieces. And then for fourth column, we're grabbing Revitalizing Blast, which causes damage with the solar ability to weaken champions and bosses for a short time. So before you go in to pop that super, hit him with the throwing hammer, get that weaken off, and then go in with your Grand Slam. We're also picking up Overload Rocket Launchers, so whenever we use a rocket launcher like Apex Predator, it has overload rounds, and it means we can just nuke those overload champions very easily like in Legend Onslaught. And then for fifth column, we're grabbing Razor Precision, so while Radiant Solar Precision final blows cause combatants to ignite, this isn't as important as we're rocking Monte Carlo, but for whatever solar special weapon you're using, this just can come in real handy. And then we're also using Argent Ordnance, so whenever we're using a rocket launcher, we just get that extra bit of damage and reload speed that we need to really take down those boss enemies. In Legend Onslaught, there's sometimes Demolitionists or Tormentors that can just destroy everything in your ADU, and having that extra damage is exactly what you need to just kick them down. Now, that's going to do it for the artifact mods. Moving on to the armor. Starting off with the helmet, we're grabbing Hands On, which we gain bonus super energy on melee takedowns. Really nice to have as we're constantly getting melee takedowns with consecration, so it means we get our Burning Maul super back up that much quicker. We're also taking Heavy Ammo Finder, which increases the drop chance of heavy ammo on takedowns with our primary weapons. Monte Carlo is always in use, so we're always getting heavy ammo drops to use for our Apex Predator or whatever heavy weapon we're using. And then finally, we're also grabbing Harmonic Siphon. We get lots of solar weapon takedowns just with our heavy and our special, and while Monte Carlo is our main weapon, it's just better to rock Harmonic, as getting those solar special takedowns are a lot easier than getting Monte Carlo takedowns in certain content. Of course, for our stat focusing, we're grabbing 100 resilience for that tier 10 damage reduction, which is 30% damage reduction in any piece of content. This also lowers the cooldown on our barricade, which means we can pop up rally barricades a lot faster. Then for our second stat we want to focus discipline and strength equally here. Now discipline because we want to make sure our healing grenade comes back as quick as possible, and then strength here so we can have our concentration going off as many times. And then finally, you want your recovery to be as high because we're in the middle of combat, we're in a lot of enemies coming around, and having our recovery stat higher means we can actually take a lot more damage because restoration is putting in that much more work. Be sure though that you don't have recovery higher than 50. Down to the gauntlets, we have our exotic, the Pyro Gale gauntlets, which grant the intrinsic perk Percussive Flames. This modifies our Burning Wall super into that single high damage slam that sends forth 3 waves of cyclones of flame. They deal massive damage, and it also modifies their concentration to send out a second wave that detonates into a cyclone of flame as well. We deal that much more damage with Pyro Gale, and it means that our supers actually become crazy strong. When an enemy's weakened, when we have Heart of Flame, Roaring Flames ×3, and Pyro Gale on, a Burning Maul super can chunk a boss down and absolutely one-shot anything else. It's really amazing what this super can do and what these exotic gauntlets can do. Now moving forward to the mods, we're grabbing Double Impact Induction, so any damage we deal with our melee is going to grab a burst of grenade energy to us, of course fueling our healing grenade and our restoration. And then we're also grabbing Heavy Handed, so our powered melee takedowns grant orbs of power. We're getting tons of melee takedowns, so it's important that we're just spawning orbs as well, because the more supers we use, the quicker we get through content and the more we can just nuke things. Down to the chest piece, we're grabbing 2 elemental resistance mods to match whatever the current daily threat modifier is. If it's arc threat, then we want to make sure we're grabbing double arc resistance, and then a 3rd elemental resistance mod to just deal with whatever secondary damage is going on in the activity. Down to the boots, we're grabbing Double Solar Weapon Surge, which grants a 17% damage increase to our solar weapons. This means that whatever energy and heavy weapon we're using, if it's solar, we're getting that much more damage to burst down champions, burst down bosses, and get the damage done that we need done. Add to that, we're also grabbing Recuperation, so whenever we pick up an Orb of Power, we're getting a burst of health. This is really important in high-end content, as when you're on a sliver of health and you spawn an Orb of Power, it can save your life and make content just a little bit easier. And finally, for the class item, we're grabbing Bomber, so whenever we use our class ability, we're getting a little bit of grenade energy back for that healing nade, and then we're also using Double Font of Restoration for a plus 50 into recovery while we have an armor charge. This means that we don't want our recovery any higher than tier 5, and it also means that we can stay in the fight that much longer as our restoration is putting in that much more work, and also if we need to take a little breather, we don't have to wait as long. And that is going to do it for the build. Now, this Grand Slam Titan build is fantastic to take into any piece of content. It's really amazing what you can do when all the buffs stack up and how much damage actually goes off on those higher tier enemies. When you're in wave 50 of Legend Onslaught and the bosses just has tons of health, being able to chunk it down like a quarter or sometimes even a third with just one super is amazing. Add to that if there's a solar surge happening, so you get a 25% damage increase to just solar flat out, it really means that this build becomes a nuclear titan. You just use your super, Grand Slam, use concentration, Grand Slam, and everything perishes in your wake. It's really fun to use and honestly such a testament to Titan builds, as even though they're a little bit more melee focused, there's really a lot that you can do with them. This means that you can just be in a group of enemies, just throwing hammers, throwing out concentrations, and living through everything. Now, of course, with all my build videos, there's a picture on screen for easy copying, along with a dim link in the description. If you haven't already, be sure to hit subscribe and ring that bell for more build videos, and if you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit it a like. If you have anything you want to say, just leave a comment, as I always try and reply to all the comments that are there, because hey, I love making these build videos for you, and I hope you enjoy trying them out, as if I'm posting a build video, it usually means I think it's worth using. Now, that's going to do it from me. I have been FreakyDude99. Thank you everybody so much for watching. Be sure to have a fantastic weekend, playing some Destiny Into the Light, grinding out those shiny weapons, and of course, we'll see you on the battlefield. Peace out, everyone.